Welcome back to Cozy English Corner. I am Alex, and as I look out the window today, the sky over Columbus, Ohio is completely gray. The temperature dropped about 20 degrees overnight, which is very typical for our Midwestern autumn.
It really is. I had to scrape frost off my windshield this morning before driving down High Street. I am Maya, by the way. Thank you for having me here, Alex.
It is wonderful to have you, Maya. And actually, your introduction is perfect for our topic today. You said, I had to scrape frost, and thank you for having me. We are talking entirely about the word have.
That is such a small word, but we use it constantly. I feel like I say it 100 times a day.
Exactly. Have is one of the most essential verbs in standard English. But for people learning the language, it is often confusing because it means so many different things. It is not just about owning an object.
Right. You can have a car, you can have breakfast, or you can have to work late. Those are entirely different situations.
Let us start with the most basic use, possession. The structure is simple. Subject plus have or has plus the object. For example, I have a microphone. She has a book.
And the rule is to use have for I, you, we, and they. But we use has for he, she, and it. That is something I still hear people struggle with.
Yes, I have a brother. My brother has a dog. But Maya, when we talk about possession, it often reveals our insecurities. When people list what they have, or more importantly, what they do not have, it carries a lot of emotional weight.
That makes complete sense. I am a freelance designer here in Columbus. Rents are rising near the university area. Often, the sentence in my mind is, I do not have a steady paycheck, or I do not have health insurance. It creates a real sense of anxiety.
I appreciate you sharing that. I do not have is the negative form. We use do not have for I, you, we, and they. And we use does not have for he, she, and it. But grammatically, simple sentences can represent heavy life realities.
Exactly. Society puts so much pressure on what we possess. By the time you are 30, the expectation is you have a house, you have a spouse, you have a solid career.
And if you do not have those things, you feel behind. Here is a fascinating linguistic fact. The word have originally came from a root word meaning to grasp or to hold in your hand. It was purely physical.
Really? So it was literally about what you could physically carry?
Yes. Only later in human history did it evolve to mean possessing abstract concepts like I have an idea or I have a problem. As human society became more complex, the things we held became invisible burdens.
Wow, that is incredibly profound. We grasp onto abstract things like debt or stress or societal expectations. I have a lot on my mind.
Precisely. Now let us move to the second major use of have, which is for experiences and activities. This is something English learners often find strange. We say have breakfast, have a meeting, or have a conversation.
A common question I hear is, why do people say have coffee instead of drink coffee?
That is a great question. You can certainly say drink coffee. But when we say let us have coffee, we are talking about the entire social experience. It is not just the physical act of swallowing liquid.
I understand. If I meet a friend at a cafe in German Village here in Columbus, we sit, we talk, we escape the cold weather. Having coffee means sharing time together.
Exactly. The Midwest is known for this kind of friendliness. We prioritize connection. We use have for many experiences. Have a good time. Have fun. Have a safe trip. It invites someone to enjoy a moment.
It sounds much warmer than just listing actions. I am drinking tea sounds like a medical observation. I am having tea sounds like a cozy afternoon.
That is a perfect description. Now, let us address the third major way we use have, and this is where the real stress lives. We use have to express obligation or necessity.
Oh, the heavy have to. I have to wake up early. I have to pay my taxes. I have to find new clients. It is the language of survival.
The structure here is the subject plus have to or has to plus the base form of a verb. For example, she has to study for her exam at Ohio State. It means something external is forcing this action.
How is have to different from must? They seem to mean the same thing in textbooks.
Must is often more personal or urgent, and it is slightly more formal in American English. Have to represents an external rule. If I say, I have to go to work, it means my boss expects me there. I have no choice.
That lack of choice is exactly what keeps me awake at night. When your entire life feels like a list of have to tasks, you feel trapped. You lose the joy of doing things.
Intelligent, empathetic. This brings me to the scientific fact I wanted to share. Psychologists have studied the framing effect of language on our brains. When we constantly say, I have to do this, our brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone. It perceives a threat to our autonomy.
Wait, really? So my grammar is actually causing me physical stress?
Yes, researchers suggest changing I have to I get to. For instance, instead of saying I have to go to work, you say I get to go to work. It shifts the brain from a state of obligation to a state of gratitude.
That is profound. I get to pay my rent means I have a place to live. I get to find clients means I have the freedom to run my own business in Columbus. That changes everything.
It does. Language shapes our reality. But returning to the grammar rules, we must also talk about the negative form of have to, because this is a very common mistake.
You mean do not have to versus must not?
Exactly. Do not have to means something is not necessary, but it is optional. You do not have to come to the meeting means you can stay home if you want. It is a relief.
But must not means it is forbidden. Like, you must not park your car on High Street during a snowstorm, or it will be towed.
Perfect local example. If you say, you do not have to park here, it means you can park elsewhere, but you are allowed to stay. If you mean it is illegal, you say, you cannot park here, or you must not park here.
That makes so much sense. I can see why English learners mix those up. If have to means obligation, you would assume do not have to means a negative obligation.
Logic tells us that, but English is not always perfectly logical. Speaking of common mistakes, there are a few others we should discuss to help our listeners sound more natural.
Oh, please do. What is the most common mistake you hear?
The biggest one is using have for age. In many languages, you have your years. So a learner might say, I have 25 years. In standard English, we use the verb to be. I am 25 years old.
That is interesting. It implies that age is something you are, not a possession you carry around in your pocket.
Exactly. Age is a state of being in English. The insecurity of aging is universal, but grammatically, we accept it as our identity. I am 30. I am 40.
What about feelings and temperature? When I stepped outside this morning in Columbus, I felt freezing. Do I say I have cold?
Good question. No, for physical feelings and temperature, we also use to be. You say, I am cold, I am hot, or I am hungry. If you say, I have a cold, it means you are sick with a viral infection.
That is a huge difference. Imagine sitting in a restaurant and telling the waiter, I have hot, when you actually mean, I am hot. Or wait, I am hot can also mean something entirely different in casual conversation, right?
It can, yes, which is why context matters. But regardless, we do not use have for those states of being. The only exception is illness. I have a headache, or I have a fever.
Okay, that is clear. There is one more mistake I hear often, even from my international friends who study at Ohio State. They say things like, "In Columbus has many parks."
Ah, yes. Saying in my city has instead of in my city there is or there are. This happens because they translate directly from their native language, where a single verb handles both existence and possession.
So the correct way is to say, "There are many parks in Columbus?"
Exactly. If you are talking about what exists in a location, use there is or there are. You can only use has if the place is the subject doing the possessing. For example, Columbus has many parks is correct, but in Columbus has is incorrect because in Columbus is a prepositional phrase, not a subject.
That is a subtle but important difference. English requires a clear subject taking responsibility for the action.
Yes, taking responsibility. And that brings us back to the psychological weight of our words. Taking responsibility for what we have versus what we are.
It is funny how a grammar lesson turned into a life audit for me. I am sitting here realizing I let the phrase, "I have to," control my mood entirely.
That is the beauty of studying a language deeply. It teaches you how you think. When you learn to speak English confidently, you also learn to listen to the messages you send yourself.
So, to recap for my own sake and for everyone listening, we use have for possession, like I have a computer. We use it for experiences, like let us have lunch. And we use have to for obligations, like I have to finish my project.
You summarized that perfectly, Maya. And remember the negative forms, do not have and does not have. And never use have to state your age or whether you are feeling cold.
Right, I am 28, and I am cold right now because Columbus weather changes every 5 minutes.
We truly experience 4 seasons in a single week here. Maya, before we finish, do you have any final advice for people who feel overwhelmed by learning these grammar rules?
I would say, do not let the fear of making a mistake stop you from speaking. Even native speakers stumble. Just focus on communicating your reality. Say, "I have a question," and ask it.
That is wonderful advice. Perfection is not the goal. Connection is. If you are listening to this, I challenge you to write a sentence in the comments below using have in a positive way. Tell us about something you enjoy having.
Like, I have a great community of friends. I love that. Focus on what we have, not what we lack.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining me today, Maya. Your perspective added so much depth to our English Corner.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I get to go home now and practice changing my have to tasks into get to tasks.
I love that application. To all our listeners, thank you for spending your time with us. Keep practicing, be patient with yourselves, and stay cozy out there. We will see you in the next episode.